What's going on, Tamers? East here. And recently I've been thinking that with the Digimon card game getting simultaneous set release across the globe, now is like the best time for new folks to hop into the game. And so anytime I see new players asking like how can I actually get involved with the game, probably the best advice I've seen is to just go to your local card or game shop and interact with the community there. And from there, once players get more familiar with the game and get a little bit of confidence in their belt, they can start to build up their Digimon TCG career and then maybe enter competitive events. And so in this video, I thought it'd be a good idea to take a look at the Digimon card game official event structure, take a look at the different kinds of events that the game does have, and then maybe a little bit more about the road to the World Championships every year. So with that, let's dive in. Broadly speaking, when we're talking about the kinds of events that Digimon card game officially has, there are two buckets, those being qualifying events and the others being non-qualifying events. Now, to talk a little bit more about each in depth, the non-qualifying events first are those events that do not lead up to the world qualifiers in some form or fashion. These include things like your local store tournaments or tamer battles over here in the East. We've also got things like regulation battles as well as the Ultimate Cups or Evolution Cups. So first up, store tournaments. These are just the simple weekly events that happen in your town or city that you can go to and play with your local Digimon scene. Keep in mind, these have different names depending on where you are in the world. So for example, in Asia, they're called tamer battles, and in the West, I think they're simply just called store tournaments. But at the end of the day, they roughly are just the same thing. A really cool incentive for going to these store tournaments is that you're actually just given a participation pack that has a promo card in it. And during that time, at the event, they typically have like a small tournament with all the players there, and the winner receives one more promo pack, and that one has like a winner stamp on it typically. And really, the promo cards in those packs have actually been pretty cool. And so the more events you go to, the more promo cards you can accumulate. So next up are regulation battles. And for all intents and purposes, you can think of these as just store tournaments, but with a bit of a twist on the rules. So for example, in the past, we've had events like you can only have common and uncommon cards in your deck, or you can only have a deck that has only one color kind of card in it. The pricing for these events have typically been alt arts of cards that have already been in the game, but the arts look really, really good. So whether you win the event or you just join the event, you'll get something for your time as well. Which brings us to our last kind of non-qualifying event for the game, that being Ultimate Cups, or in Japan they're called Evolution Cups, but literally everywhere else, Ultimate Cups. I like to think of these as kind of like the midpoint between the casual player and the competitive player, where you're starting to kind of transition over into more competitive play, where these events aren't like your local store tournaments, they're a bit larger in size, and the pricing that they give out is based on how well you do in the tournament. So as for pricing for these events, Bandai typically picks like one or two canonical Digimon lines, for example, Koromon, Agumon, Greymon, Metal Greymon, War Greymon, and the better you do in the event, the better cards you'll get, or the more cards you'll get. And so you can think of like everyone getting a participation prize like the Koromon, and then after that, depending on like, top 64, top 32, 16, 8, 4, and then the winner, where you typically receive better cards, where the winner typically receives the level 6. What I really like about this kind of event is that if you've been playing the card game for a couple of months casually, and you're wanting to kind of just dip your toe into the game competitively, these are great ways or great places to do that. Also, if you're a more competitive player, it's just a great time to practice playing in a competitive environment without like the world's qualifiers on the line. Which brings us to our second broad category of events, those being qualifier events. These are ones that are competitive focused and lead up to the World Finals at the end of the competitive season. Now for this one, I think I need to set the mood, so give me just a moment here. This one? Yeah. That's right, no casuals, only tier 1 decks. We sweat and we sweat hard. Nah, I'm just messing with y'all, yeah. Yeah, actually, instead of the light, give me one more second. Let me just hit the door. Yeah, we closed that because we're not going to need to go outside ever again. The only grass we're ever going to be touching is cardboard. So the tricky thing about the competitive season for Digimon is that it's a little bit different depending on where you are in the world and what region you're in. However, there are a couple of parallels that do run throughout all of the regions, so we'll talk about those first. Now, when we talk about the competitive year for Digimon, we actually split that into two separate seasons. That being Season 1 and then Season 2, with both seasons having ways for players to qualify from every region. So a little bit more information about each of those seasons. Season 1 typically runs from about April until August, with Season 2 picking up at the end of August running until December. At the start of the new year in January and February, there's a couple of other small tournaments which we'll talk about in a little bit, but then we have the World's Finals in March. And although the names and the types of events may differ depending on where you live in the world, one big parallel to help you conceptualize how the tournament system runs for Digimon is think of it in 3 stages, that being regionals, nationals, and then worlds. You have to go through each one of those steps in one form or fashion in order to actually compete for the season. So now let's touch a little bit on each region to see what their road to qualification looks like, starting with North America. So for NA, at the regional level, there's actually 2 ways to qualify, that being actual regional events. These are like the regional tournaments. They're huge events. They usually happen in like Texas or Florida or California, and from these events, the top 64 players would typically get an invite to nationals. Some of these also do happen online, so if you're not anywhere near an actual event venue, then online might be a chance for you to qualify. Alongside the proper regional tournaments are something called store regionals. These are like somewhat smaller in size events, typically like 32 to 64 people, but they're run at larger card shops or larger game shops. And for these events, the size of the participation dictates how many players get to qualify or get an invite to nationals. Some example figures we've seen before is if there are 1 to 23 players, only the winner of the event gets an invite. If there are 24 to 47, the top 2 get an invite to nationals. And then if the event is anywhere from 48 to 64 entrants total, then the top 4 will get invites to nationals. So let's imagine that you've done well enough either at a store regional, a proper regional, or an online regional in order to get an invite to nationals. Keep in mind for the North America region, nationals events are invite only, but there are 2 nationals that happen, one for each cycle. The first one in September and the second one I believe in January of the following year. We don't currently have any information about how many players will qualify from the event, but you can pretty much guarantee that the winner of the national event will qualify if nothing else. So very quickly I want to touch on Europe, LATAM, and Oceania all at once because they're actually pretty similar. All 3 of these regions have regional events that you can qualify at, with Europe also having store regionals. The other 2 regions I believe do not have store regionals, but someone fact check me in the comments. One big difference though from the North American region is how their nationals are done. There are no Season 1 nationals for any of these regions. All of the qualifiers who win the regional level qualifiers go to the nationals at the end of Season 2 to qualify for Worlds. Which finally brings us back over the pond to Southeast Asia and Japan. And all I have to say about these 2 regions is that the road to qualify is... Alright. Break out the charts and pictures and your notebooks and pencils and pens because this is a tough one. So broadly speaking, the way this works is that Southeast Asia and Japan for Cycle 1 kind of compete together at the national stage where they have regional qualifiers in their own regions. The nationals are together, and then Season 2 is kind of the same thing with the regionals being in their own region, and then the nationals are then separate. No, I don't know why Bandai decided to do that. So then again, in Southeast Asia, in Season 1, you have what's called the Grand Asia Open events. These are events that happen all over in each of the countries in Southeast Asia, and players from each of those events can qualify. Think of them as the regionals for Southeast Asia. The winners from these events will then earn an invite to the nationals for the Asia region, in this case, I guess, which takes place in Tokyo. And from that event, you can have players from outside of Japan in Southeast Asia, as well as Japanese players competing. So then again, very quickly in Southeast Asia, you have the Grand Asia Open regional events that happen in each of the regions outside of Japan, and then the winners from those are invited to the Grand Asia Open finals that happen in Tokyo that has not only the Southeast Asian players, but also a couple of invited Japanese players as well. From this event, a couple of players will qualify. We don't have any numbers this year yet, but we do know that in the past it's been the top 4 players who do qualify from this event to go to Worlds later on in the year. And then Season 2 for Southeast Asia just has a bunch of regional events like the Grand Asia Openings, but the names are different, or Grand Asia Opens, excuse me, but the names are different. And these events will just have players qualify for what's called the Asia Finals, where at the end of the competitive season for Season 2, all of the qualifying players from the Southeast Asian region only, without Japan, will compete for, I believe, 2 spots to go to Worlds. And then finally, alongside all these regional events, there's another event called the Super Tamer Battle, which we don't have a lot of details on yet, but apparently it will provide some sort of qualification to the World or Nationals for the season. So that brings us to Japan. Now, Japan is a little bit different from pretty much every other region in that their regionals qualifiers are split up into different stages. And what do I mean by that? So for example, in order to qualify for nationals, you have to win 3 tournaments. The first one being like a local area qualifier, or what's called an Area 1 qualifier. And then all of the winners for the Area 1 qualifier are basically sent to a larger qualifier called an Area 2 qualifier. So all the winners for Area 1 play in Area 2, and then all of the winners for Area 2 play in like a nationals qualifier in order to find the best players to join the Grand Asia Open Finals in Tokyo. Quick refresher, the Grand Asia Open Finals are the event that the Southeast Asia players and the Japanese players play in at the end of Season 1. They also have something called Super Tamer Battles, which are like auto-qualifying events, but there's 2 that happen in Japan. One is in Tokyo and one is in Osaka, so basically East Japan and West Japan. The winners for each of those events will qualify for their respective nationals events. So for Season 1, that'll be the Grand Asia Open Finals for Asia, and then season 2 it'll be the Japan finals, which we'll talk about in just a moment. And then outside of that, there's like one last chance qualifier called the DC1 Grand Prix. Now this is essentially just one tournament, and then like the top players of this, I don't remember the exact numbers, but the top players of this who qualify get a direct invite to the season nationals. So one more time, the end of season 1, the nationals for Japan, is again together with the Southeast Asia region, and this is the Grand Asia Open finals. For season 2 in Japan, there's what's called the Japan Nationals. This is just a tournament with only Japan that has the same 3 area qualifiers beforehand, and then all the players get their invite to that tournament. And so that's the general gist of the Digimon card game competitive season for any given year. A couple of last minute points. You're probably wondering, East, well, what about China and Korea? I wish I knew. Chinese is a difficult language, and I checked the website, and it is a jungle over there. I don't know where anything is, and I couldn't, like, even with a translator, figure anything out. So if you're from China and you have some insight you'd love to share, put them down in the comments below. Additionally, the same thing with Korean. I don't read Hangul or whatever the Korean language is called, and so I could not figure stuff out. Sorry. The same applies to you folks in Korean as well. If you guys want to put down the information for your competitive season in the comments below, I'd love to learn about it as well. And so finally, if you've come to this point in the video and you still have a couple of questions, feel free to put those down in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer those, and I'm sure some of the folks out there who have better tournament knowledge than I do will be able to help you as well. Anyways, folks, I'm actually going to go get ready for my local store tournaments, or tamer battles as they're called over here in Asia, so I'm going to get out of here. Before you get out of here, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.